Hello and welcome to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grosboll, and joining me today is Harriet Cabelly. And Harriet is a grief counselor, a therapist, a speaker, and an author dedicated to helping people navigate life's most challenging circumstances. And she has a new book out that was just launched in January. It is called Light Through Darkness: Miracles Along My Cancer Journey. And that is backwards. Sorry about that. So welcome to the show, Harriet.
Thanks for having me, Melissa.
Oh, I am so excited to have you on. I read your book over the weekend and I absolutely loved it. It is very easy to read in one or two sittings, and it is concise and very powerful, and I loved everything about it. So I can't wait to talk about it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for picking it up to read it, actually.
Absolutely. I loved it. All right. So you are from Long Island.
Long Island, yes.
And as you said before we started recording, that you can go anywhere in the world and people can hear the accent.
I know, it's very heavy. Born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens, living on Long Island the last 35 years.
All right. So no aspirations of ever living anywhere else?
Not really. I mean, I travel the world, but I like it here.
There's no place like home.
You could be in a suburb, you can be in the city, you can be out in the country. You know, within a couple hours, you could be anywhere. I'm not too far from the ocean, so
that is true.
Good all around.
Yes, living in Colorado, we are many, many hours from anything.
Yeah, I have not been there yet, but I would like to.
Well, if you ever get out to visit, look me up. I'll show you the fun stuff.
Okay.
All right.
Denver, Colorado, right? My favorite, what was his name? The guy who did West Virginia. Oh, John Denver.
Oh, John Denver, yes.
That's what I relate to, that whole area out there.
I thought you were going to say John Elway from the Broncos, because that's...
I'm aging myself. John Denver, my time.
Hey, I remember John Denver too. You're not aging yourself that much. But was it Rocky Mountain High? I think was Rocky Mountain High, Colorado. Yeah, that was the song. Mm-hmm. I miss the water. I grew up on the East Coast, and I still miss the water every day. But I love the mountains too, so yeah, we're still here.
Probably a lot of good hiking trails.
There is a lot of good hiking out here. Yes, outdoor activities. We are probably about the tops in the nation for year-round outdoor type activities. Just the older I get, the less I like the cold, and I'm about ready to head to warmer pastures.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's get into this, Harriet. So take us back. So it was just about 3 years ago. I want you to take us back to, what happened? How did you get to the hospital and first get that diagnosis?
So it was actually exactly 3 years ago, March of 2022. Okay. When I was diagnosed. As I said, I live not too far from the beach, and I'm an avid exerciser and hiker and walker. So I was walking on the boardwalk, Long Beach boardwalk. That's what I do all the time. And that particular Sunday, I went and I couldn't walk. It's like, what's going on? But I really should backtrack a second just to say that I've always had a weak gut. People have their weak links. Some people get migraines. Some people have stomach stuff. I'm someone who gets stomach stuff. I've always had irritable bowel. So a few months before, I had one of my stomach episodes, and I had an endoscopy, which just showed once again you have gastritis. And okay, but I found a few months later I was kind of losing weight. I'm a small person. I've always been thin. So for me to lose even 3 pounds is like, what the heck's going on here? So that morning when I went to Long Beach Boardwalk, it was weird. I couldn't do more than like 2 minutes. And I said, what is this? So I was with my husband. He said, I don't know, maybe you're dehydrated. So I went to the emergency room thinking I'm just going to get my fluids. They encouraged me to get a CAT scan. I said, I just had one a year ago. I had an endoscopy literally 3 months ago. But okay, I got a CAT scan of my abdomen. And you know how they say no news is good news? So for me, that 3-hour wait in the emergency room to get results, it's like, well, in this case, no news must mean bad news. So the ER.
My husband always jokes. He says that no news just is no news. He doesn't look at it either side.
Okay, well, for me, that no news was bad news. And the poor ER doctor, who is a stranger, doesn't know me from a hole in the wall. They were still wearing masks then. It was kind of towards the end of COVID, but I guess still the COVID time. She comes out, and I could see just her slits of her eyes looking like, oh, God. And she tells me I have a large mass sitting on three major organs.
Wow.
So right away, it's like, oh, I guess this is my death sentence. Who knows? My husband starts crying profusely. I'm sitting like a stone, propped up in that little cubicle against the wall, feeling nothing, I guess, total shock. And fast forward, 6 days later, after I had biopsies, I got the good cancer diagnosis, or shall we say the better one, which turned out to be not what the ER doctor, what that radiologist read at all, but non-Hodgkins lymphoma, large B cell, which...
Now, did they tell you, like, did that ER doc, like, give you, like, what kind of cancer that she thought it was? Or
according to the radiology report, it was a very large mass sitting on 3 organs. And also, my liver, my bile ducts were completely shutting down. So like the nurse had said to me, didn't you notice you were yellow? No, I didn't notice I was yellow. And apparently they were really blocked, and I had to get immediately, before even the correct diagnosis came, I had to get 2 stents to open up my bile ducts. Wow. That's how blocked they were. And it's all weird because this is my funny part. 3 days before, on a Thursday, I was taking my tango lesson. I take ballroom dancing classes at Fred Astaire, something I've always wanted to do. So I had just started like 6 weeks before. And for some strange reason, I had one of the instructors videotape this lesson. I don't know why. And I sat there and I said, how can I have a large mass sitting on 3 organs? I came in for fluids. Here's my video to prove I was just taking my tango lesson. And it's like, okay, I don't know. But either way, it turned out to be non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, my oncologist never staged me, which was odd because I know a lot of people, unfortunately, since I've had my cancer, that have had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they've all been staged. And my doctor, either she doesn't necessarily do that, or she didn't want to tell me, because the only thing she did say is it's aggressive and fast growing and you got to get into chemo immediately. So I don't know. I'm going to assume I had either stage 3 or 4 just because she used the words fast growing and aggressive, but I was never officially given a stage. She said that's only stages are for solid tumors or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, maybe with lymphomas and leukemias and stuff, they don't. Well, I mean, stage 4 is it's metastasized throughout your body. That's important. But the other 3, maybe not so much.
Maybe. I don't know. Okay. But either way, I started treatment pretty, within a week.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So that's how it presented. It presented for me in my gut. And I've heard since then that this type of lymphoma can present in all over the place. Like I know 2 people that presented in their lungs, and they had like ongoing coughs. And that's how it came to that. That's how they discovered it. So it seems to present in various ways.
Well, I mean, you have lymph nodes all over your body. Yeah. So depending on where, where the tumor or where it presents itself is going to be kind of where you feel it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I love in your book, you talked about the 10 miracles, and I love how you shared your story in the midst of each of these miracles. So we're not necessarily going to go into detail on all of them, but I mean, tell me how you, like, when you were in the process of going through all of this, were you seeing the miracles, or was this when you looked back on it, a year or 2 later, that you could see in each situation that there was a miracle involved?
Right. So that's a great question. So I'm going to say yes to both. Not so much that I look back a year or 2 later, but when I finished treatment, I looked back and said, oh my God, this was miraculous. And I'll give you an example, but some of them were actually during the treatment that I could say, oh, wow, look at this. So I'll just give like a couple of examples. So I had a horrific ER stay before I was admitted, that my doctor said, you've got to get admitted immediately, go through the ER. And it was a horrible process of 24 hours hanging out and no curtains and hearing everybody's, it was awful. And when I finally got to a room, which wasn't it was going to be my room for that week, but not later on, because they put me in the stem cell unit, because that's the only place they had a bed. And I walked, and they wheeled me into this room, and it was a view of the Hudson River, and the walls were purple. And it was like, oh my God, what a reward I just got for 24 hours of hell. Because A, purple's my favorite color, and B, there's nothing more soothing to me than water. As I said, I walk by the beach. I have a waterfall in my backyard. I just love nature, and I love it. And it's like, okay, if I had to go through this, thank God this is a lovely reward. I have to spend the 5 days. I had the nurse push the bed up against the big windows so I could really see the view of the water, as opposed to if I was more in the middle or closer to the door, I'd only see partial. That's how much it meant to me. So at that particular time, I looked at that and said, thank God, something good has come out of this 24-hour nightmare in the ER. So that was like something that I noticed right then and there that I was really able to embrace. And I remember writing it down and saying, I'm grateful. I'm grateful I came into a gorgeous room.
And if you had been admitted earlier, if there had been other beds available, you probably would not have had that room. So
exactly. There you go.
I love
right?
that.
I would have been on the regular oncology floor, which some of them have the view of the Hudson partial, but none of them have purple walls.
Is it only the stem cell area that has purple walls?
They redid the whole floor, that section. So it's just beautiful. It's unlike the rest of the hospital, which is old and not so appealing, but you know, that's what the hospital is. But this unit had recently been redone.
Well, and I love that they're finally realizing that if people are going to be staying in the hospital, you know, you don't necessarily want it to be a hospital room or look like, you know, the stark and sterility of regular hospital rooms, that people need to stay there and they need something to kind of lift them up somehow.
It all should be, all hospital rooms should be like that. I mean, and also it was my own room as opposed to sharing a room.
Nice.
But, you know, when you're having a stem cell transplant, you have to be in solitary confinement, basically. So you're going to have your own room, and they make it as nice as possible because people stay sometimes a month or maybe even longer. So, yeah, so that was the silver lining of that. Or as I said, that was the miracle.
All right. And your treatments were for like a week at a time, right? So did you have to be in the hospital for all of that time, or how did that work?
So they were 5 days because I had 6 rounds of treatment, EPOC treatment, a cocktail of chemo. And within each cycle, I also had a lumbar puncture, which was not pleasant at all. But the first treatment I did in hospital, and I was hooked up for 5 days to IV. So my chemo was a 5-day treatment, and then so 5 days on, being infused with the chemo, and then 2 weeks off. So after the first cycle, my doctor said, you know, you're a good candidate for doing it at home as opposed to coming in each round to the hospital, because basically, other than having cancer, I know it sounds funny, I was healthy. I've been active my whole life. I've been, like I said, an exerciser and basically eating healthy. And she said, you're a good candidate. Why don't you try it? So I was nervous about trying it. But I figured, okay, what have I got to lose? If I don't like it, I can always go back the rest of the rounds to the hospital. But, you know, you get nervous. What if the machine beeps? What if something's wrong? This way you're in the hospital and you have the care. But I listened to her and I did it, and it worked great. And then I did all the rest at home. So that, again, was another miracle that I wrote about, which I noticed present. I didn't have to see it back a year later, that each time I went through a cycle at home and everything went smoothly and it didn't beep, or I didn't have a clogged wire or pipe, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is great. Thank you. And I was grateful each cycle of how it worked. And the one time that it was beeping a lot was after they hooked me up in the hospital, and I hadn't even gotten on the highway yet to go home. And I turned around and went back because they had to fix something. So even that piece worked out. So again, it's like, well, if you have to do it, at least it went smoothly. And at night, it was like I carried it around like a little dolly in a knapsack. At night, at night, I laid it next to me, making sure the wires were all straight so that it wouldn't, start to beep in the middle of the night. And, you go through what you have to go through and then hope, okay, it didn't beep. If it beeped, there was numbers you could call to troubleshoot. But I'm like an hour away from the hospital, so I didn't want to have to, go back or whatever. So that worked out too.
So now you just had to go to the hospital then on Monday and get hooked up and everything, and then go back on Friday to have them unhook it all?
So I had to go 3 times. Monday to get the hookup. Wednesday, they hooked it up twice. Monday was a 48-hour hookup. Wednesday was the next 48-hour hookup. Friday was the detachment, the unhook up, with a final thing that they put in on a Friday for an hour. But so I went in Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
All right. I mean, better 3 times for what, an hour or 2 than 5 full days
in the hospital where you're basically stuck in a room. And this way I could be home, and like it was summer, it was spring into summer. I could be out on my deck. It's a whole different ballgame. Right. I remember sitting in the waiting room. I think it was cycle 3 or 4. And someone noticed I had my fanny pack, and he said to me, "Oh, my doctor's encouraging me to take it home. How has it been for you?" And we had a whole conversation. I didn't even know he used the same doctor as me. And when I went in to see my doctor, I guess it was after he went in, he said, "Oh, because of your conversation with so-and-so, he's now going to try it at home." So he was using my same doctor with the same cancer. And because I told him how it was, why not give it a shot? It's working for me. He did it.
I love that.
Well, you never know where you could make a slight difference, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, and I say it all the time that cancer is the worst club with the best members, and just the community, even the, 10-minute conversation community that we build as cancer patients, cancer survivors. Like, there's some of the most impactful conversations and relationships that, I've ever had in my entire life. And I really feel like that is a blessing that has come from, just going through all of this crap.
And I think part of it is people are vulnerable. We're at our lowest and vulnerable. So we kind of connect with people in our lowest states. We're not wearing that mask of, oh, everything's hunky-dory. And we're connecting on a bit of a different level. I think that could be why. That's what I feel.
Right. And it's also interesting that, before I was diagnosed, I don't have any family history of cancer. Cancer was just something that was never on my radar. Being in the health and wellness profession, my entire career, it just wasn't really a thing for me. And it's very interesting how people patients, survivors, whatever, how they respond and communicate with people who have been through cancer also versus people that never have. That there's just like this deeper level of, okay, you get me,
right? Versus
talking to somebody who's never experienced it. There's kind of a little more of a barrier there, right, which I just think is fascinating.
Right. And having said that, the support from your family and friends, although they haven't gone through it, is just so crucial. It's just life affirming. Again, to your point, no, most of them, hopefully, thank God, haven't gone through it, but they could be there.
Right. And they love you, and they want to support you however they can.
Right. So they may not have the best words or know exactly what to say, but you know where it's coming from. So the fruit platters and the blankets and the phone calls, it's embracing. It's, it's raising that, what's it called? The oxytocin when mommy's nurse and the hormone, I think it's the oxytocin, right? It just flows because you're embellished with that love and support.
Right. It is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the second part of your book, you talk about coping cards. And I love some of the pictures that you had, for all of your different cards. So how did that come about? I mean, you're a grief counselor and a therapist. So I'm sure that you were able to use a lot of the strategies that you do with your clients. But tell us a little bit more about the coping cards.
Okay, so yeah, and the last part is actually some of the tools that I use. But it's interesting because when I was first diagnosed, you're thrown into such a tizzy. It's like the rug was pulled out under you. It's out of left field, as it is for most people, of course. And I remember a good friend, one of my oldest, closest friends, Eve, said to me like 2 weeks into my diagnosis, well, you have to start utilizing some of the things that you teach and work with your clients on. So, shape up and do some of the stuff you preach. So I thought to myself, one of my foundational concepts that to me informs my personal life and my professional life is Viktor Frankl's work. Viktor Frankl wrote this life-changing book, Man's Search for Meaning. He was in the concentration camps. He was a psychiatrist, and then he developed out of that his theories on logotherapy, meaning and purpose, how important that is in our lives, no matter what we're going through, that can give us a reason, a raison d'etre. That's what we hang on to. That can get us through the toughest times. So one of his basic concepts is it's not what happens to us, it's how we respond to what happens to us, right? Because we can't necessarily control what happens to us. So yes, we're a victim of circumstances, right? You're a victim of getting a cancer diagnosis. You're a victim if, God forbid, a drunken driver slams into you. But you don't have to maintain the victimhood mentality. You can then choose how you're going to respond to what has befallen you, right? Just think of Nelson Mandela sitting in jail for over 20 years and how he improved his life basically. And so many people look at Christopher Reeves. He often had said that no one would wish for anything terrible to happen, but that he felt he made the biggest impact in the world after he was first paralyzed, after his horse accident, not as the famous Superman.
Right.
So it's how we take what befalls us and how we choose to respond. And choice is a huge concept in Viktor Frankl's work. And that really, when I first read the book in college, it was life-changing, and it continues to inform my life. So at that point, when my friend Eve said to me how, you have to start using your own stuff that you work with clients on, the first thing that came to my mind was, okay, this is my horrible circumstance. I can now choose how I'm going to handle it and how I'm going to respond to it, which doesn't mean you don't have anxiety and upset and all kinds of stuff, but there's still little choices within the day.
And both things can be true at the same time. It can suck, and you can look for blessings.
Exactly. And I love that. And that's the power of the and.
Right.
It can suck, and so I can be exhausted during the day. And as my oncologist would say, listen to your body. And then I could feel better for a half hour and say, let's go walk around the duck pond, or let's sit by the bench and just look at the flowers.
Love that.
Being intentional and bringing in something pretty or uplifting, whatever that may be.
Is that kind of a therapy thing? Because I think my therapist first, because I'm like, I was always an either or. And she's like, okay, why don't we look at both and? Like, both things can be true at the same time. Like, wow, opens up a whole new world.
Right. And that's also a big concept in the field of positive psychology, which is also, yes, nobody's Pollyanna-ish. Things are awful. We're not saying it's not. But, and you can also find or look for or see glimmers and bring that in. Just a funny example, like you're walking and you see the beautiful rose. So you could say, oh, I'm not going to smell that rose because there's thorns and I may get pricked and I'll scratch myself. Or you could look at it and say, oh, that's beautiful. I want to go closer to it. I'll be more careful. I'll just watch where I go. So that you could, it's a choice. You're going to shut it down totally because you're afraid of getting, pricked by the thorns, or you're going to say the beauty is calling to me and I'm going to be a little more careful. All I'm saying is it's choices. it's mindset, it's choices. But I think I went off the concept of the cards.
Yeah.
I have a
I was
card
going to
right
bring you
here.
back to it. It's okay.
I have a card right here. I'm going to bend down off the camera and just, I should have had it here. I didn't think. I'm sorry. I'm going to pull it up.
For those on audio, they're not going to see it anyway, but we can describe it.
Oh, that's right. For those on audio. Okay, but those on YouTube might see it, right?
Absolutely. Those on YouTube will see it.
Okay, so here's an example. So I love quotes and I love pictures. So when I travel, I always take pictures, and my den is filled with, my husband and I blow up, our pictures. It's kind of the fabric of our life, and it's beautiful memories. So this was a picture in, not Bryce, Zion National Park in Utah.
Oh, Zion is incredible.
So this was part of like my therapy. I would find a nice picture, and I decided what it represented to me. So I wrote embracing strength, and there's little me against these huge big mountains. And the back, I wrote, my intention is to allow the strength of the mountains to support and embrace me in coping with this process. Mm. So, and then my husband would laminate them, and I did a whole bunch. And I actually was doing this with a creative arts therapist that I enlisted when I started my chemo. I said, I don't want the typical therapy. I don't want a support group, but I found this person that really resonated with me, who was into arts and nature and mindfulness. So together, I started these on my own, but then together we created a lot more. So like just one more, growth. These were in sequoia. These are the sequoia trees in California.
Beautiful trees, yes.
So I wrote on top, growth. They're so big. My intention is for these trees to support me in my ability to grow through this major challenge. So it was the doing them that was very helpful. And some of them I remember for my lumbar punctures, I would carry this in with me. The nurses would ask, and I would tell them, I would just kind of visualize the strong mountains to give me that strength. I could do this. When you're having that lumbar puncture and they're going into your spine and it ain't too pleasant. So sometimes I would bring some, but usually they were by my nightstand, and I would look at some of them in the morning. And again, creating them was very therapeutic for me.
I bet. Yeah, I was gonna ask that, because I was envisioning, like, there are these, I don't know, they're not tarot cards, but they're like angel cards, or all different kinds of cards, and you just kind of pick one for the day. And that's kind of what you focus on. So that was, when I was reading, that was kind of what I was thinking, is like, okay, it's a new day. Like, what am I going to focus on today? But I like the fact of just looking through them and having specific ones for when you were having specific procedures too.
Yeah. And just, and doing them,
right.
The actual finding pictures. What do I need today? I want something that represents strength. I want something that represents like hope. And this one was on a sunrise. I won't go through each. So like that kind of thing.
I love that. Yes. Anything that we can do to make the process, I don't want to say easier, but more manageable, to have a more positive outlook on it, because our attitude toward things, from an emotional level, can affect physical healing. It can affect all of that. So
definitely. And try to ward off a little bit of anxiety and depression, and just bringing kind of nice things in. So for me, it's light and pictures and nature, and for everyone it's different. Mm-hmm.
What works for you, right?
It's what works for you. Yeah. So this was part of my toolkit.
And is this something that you talk to your clients about, and you work with your clients on, different things?
I've shared this. Okay. I've shared some, but I don't like push it, again, because it's so individual. For someone else, it's whatever it is. I don't know. I'm an avid reader, and I was going to say, for others, it's reading. I'm an avid reader. I couldn't pick up a book during my treatment. I couldn't focus. I just couldn't. I couldn't pick. So that's something that I realized, even though I love reading and I love books, that was not something that I was able to do that brought me enjoyment or took me in another place, but this did. So but again, it's to be intentional about at least infusing your days with something that can nourish you.
Right.
And whatever that may look like.
Because we need that hope. We need something to look forward to. We need something to kind of help us go through, because, this is a grief process as well. My grief counselor has told me that many times. We look at grief as, oh, someone dies or someone leaves or something like that, and getting through your grief. And I have learned that, instead of getting through your grief is the person that walks along with you for your whole life. And it's changing your relationship with grief. But even something like cancer, I mean, it's still a loss. You're grieving the loss of this aspect of health, or,
Definitely.
something like that. And it's something to really needs to be worked on.
Right. Work through. Absolutely. Because people don't realize that, like you said, grief is not only the loss of a loved one due to death. Mm-hmm. Grief is anything that we lose that's meaningful to us. It could be retirement for people, empty nesting. I mean, empty nesters, illness. There are so many, somebody, your best friend moves away after 40 years and you're grieving her loss because that was the person you had coffee with 4 mornings a week. I mean, it shows itself in so many ways in our life. You lose a job, it's grief. So yes, we have to allow ourselves the feelings of loss. And then as we go through them, we can hopefully come out the other end and rebuild.
Right.
But like you said so beautifully, it walks alongside you. Yeah. If it's a person or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I lost my dad over 30 years ago. And I mean, time heals all wounds and all of that stuff. I mean, I still miss my dad every day. Sure. And it's like, I thought I got through this and I thought I got past this, and, something else has come up. And like I said, my therapist has helped me to see that, it's your relationship to grief, because it's always going to be with you. That relationship may just change as time goes by. And it's the same thing with cancer. I mean, it is a loss. It is in some ways a death.
Right. And your
will always be with you.
Definitely. It's always with you. So when people say, when are you going to get over it? There's no getting over, let's say, the loss of your dad or a death. You don't get over. It just transforms into a different way that, like you say, you have a relationship with it. You carry it with you. It's a love you hold with you forever, but it changes. It's kind of like, if you think of it as a missing piece, you don't fill that missing piece. You're never getting another dad back. But what you do is you grow around it. So you're growing around it and hopefully bigger. But the empty piece stays there. You're just growing. So you're recreating a new life, always holding that peace and that love. So it's almost like visualizing it to me, is always more helpful, to have that visual.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a bit more of an auditory learner, so I like hearing the words and stuff. Yeah. I'm a little better at that than visualizing, but depending on what works best for you. And I will say that learning that and accepting that, I mean, there's a difference between learning it and really, integrating it.
Definitely.
Has just made such a huge difference. And for me, at least, I'm fortunate that I went through a lot of that therapy before I was diagnosed. So the integration, was I was already on that journey. So it made it a little bit easier. But I highly recommend counseling, therapy when you are going through this, because you need somebody to talk to and you need somebody to help you process all of these emotions that are going haywire. I think of Inside Out, the movie on steroids when it comes to, dealing with cancer.
Yeah, definitely. And I just watched part 2 with my grandkids. It's great, the second one. But it sounds like you've got a great therapist, because everything you're saying, she says is, right. Yes. Therapy for grief is like, so what are you going to do? You're just going to talk about the sadness? It's so much more. It's so much more than that, because not to get derailed off on this, but we don't do grief well as a society.
No, we don't.
Because we're uncomfortable around other people's pain. So we don't sit, and we feel like we have to have the words. And when it's been 3 months, aren't you over it? I mean, we just don't really do it well. So sometimes going for grief therapy or counseling is a huge benefit, huge.
And anybody who says, why don't you just get over it, has never really gone through it.
Right. Right. Or they'll think that they could just, push it away and push it away and push it away. And it really surfaces in other ways. I always think of that, again, as a visual, a tube of toothpaste. If it doesn't come out that main hole on top, it's going to start oozing all over, and you're not going to realize the mess you make. And that's kind of like this. You deal with it. It's painful. The only way through it is into it. You got to go in it to come through it. But we're not taught that it's okay to feel pain. Right. We're taught, you have pain, what are you going to do? Numb it. Go to the bar. You had a rough day? Have a drink. And I'm not knocking to have social drinking sometimes, but our messages seem to be that this is how we deal with things. We take pills, we take drinks, we numb. Absolutely. Because we don't want to feel pain. Of course, nobody wants to feel pain, but it's in the feeling. I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's in going through into the feeling that we can come out of it in a healthier way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll share a real quick story. So my father passed away very close to when I got married. And I just, I cried, obviously, and then I just put it away. Like, I got to get on with my life. It's done. It's over with. And it was almost 20 years later that I had a friend who lost her son in Afghanistan during the war. I found out I had never even met the son. I just knew her. And I cried for 3 days about this young man dying that I had never met. And I went to the funeral and I cried. Like, I had to sit in the back because it was just embarrassing. And I went and I talked to my pastor and he said, okay, you're grieving for your dad, and it's time, because it's going to come out eventually.
Right.
It's just not always the appropriate, environment. And so I said, all right, so am I just supposed to start going to funerals of people that I don't know? Is that how I can process my grief, by just bawling my eyes out at funerals of people that I don't even know?
That's funny.
But I mean, I grieved for my dad. It took 20 years and it took, a somewhat innocuous experience to bring it all out of me and start that process. So, when my mom passed away a few years ago, I had those tools already, and I knew how to work on grieving in a more productive manner. Right. So that it was,
but that was great that the pastor said that, because it helped you make that connection. Otherwise, we don't necessarily make the connection. Why would we think, grieving 20 years later for the loss of a friend's son would have anything to do with your father?
Right.
So bravo that he made that connection, because I was, as you were saying it, that was what it was, of course, Yeah. But
sometimes you need other people in your life to bring these things out, because you're not going to get them on your own.
Right. Because the subconscious, we have a whole other world under there, and it doesn't always do what we think it's doing or what we consciously are aware of, but it's there, and it's going to reveal itself at other points in time, unbeknownst to us. And then we're like shocked. I'll have clients who'll say, I went into the store and there was this smell, and it's so many years later, and I just had a meltdown in the middle of the aisle because I smelled whatever. Right. Because that was the smell of your parents' kitchen when you'd walk into the house, and it brought back those memories. So they flood you. That's a normal response. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're stuck back there. That'll be always, but that's normal. Just say, oh yeah, I'm remembering that smell. And it brings the love and the sadness. But again, we don't realize that, right? The end. Right. So sometimes grief counseling is simply educating. Educating that, yes, that's fine. That's perfectly normal. It doesn't mean, oh my God, is something wrong with you?
And don't be so hard on yourself for feeling things.
Exactly. Yeah. It's something I didn't necessarily let myself do during my cancer treatment, which I realized later was probably my coping mechanism of being a bit in denial. Because as is common sometimes, common and sometimes don't go together in a sentence, so that's an oxymoron. As can be common, we often have our, let's say, meltdowns after the fact. So for me, I did a lot more crying when I was done with my treatment. And I remember talking to I call her my creative arts therapist, and it was like, well, of course. When you're going through it, you're rallying. You got to just get through it. And then when it's done, it's like, everything can like come out. It's safe now. You can fall apart. You can break down. Not that you're really breaking down, but let's say having more of the crying episodes, because it's okay. It's safe. Beforehand, it's like you're revving up. I got to get through this. At least that's how it was for me.
I got to fight. I got to fight. I got to fight.
Right. No time for this. That you're not really saying it, but that's how the body is taking it. No time to like break down. You have to just like soldier through. But again, that was for me. I feel like that's how I had to do it. And one of my cards is actually a horse with blinders on, because that was my, again, visual. That was my visual of, I'm not looking here, I'm not looking there, I'm not looking anything up on the internet. I don't want to know all the bad statistics or the side effects. I'm putting one foot in front of the other and doing what I have to do to get through this.
Beautiful. I love that. All right. So I ask all of my guests, if you were to come across someone who was just diagnosed, very recently diagnosed, or in a state of overwhelm about a diagnosis, what is one piece of advice that you would give to that person based on your experience to kind of help them through this process?
Accept all your feelings. Know that they're all normal. Don't try to push them away. Also, embrace the mindset that how you handle this is really your choice, and it's really up to you. You don't have to be a victim of the day-to-day. I know it's not exactly coming out right, but it's like you can carve out how you are going to go through this, even in the smallest of pieces and choices. And that's so important, because when we're given a diagnosis, we feel powerless. Everything's out of our control. So what are some of the things we can control? What are some of the things we have decision-making in? And so, like I said, everyone's telling me, did you look this up? Did you look that up? Are you going to a support group? No, I was listening to myself. So maybe that's what it is. Listen to yourself and what you feel works best for you. There'll be all the good sayers, and everyone will have their tips of advice, well-intentioned, but be quiet and feel what might be good for you intuitively.
Perfect. I love that.
I said a lot, but it's
That's
more
okay.
than one thing. Till I got there.
That's right. Sometimes you have to process to get to the point.
Right.
All right. Well, the book is called Light Through Darkness, Miracles Along My Cancer Journey. It's available on Amazon and also on your website. And we're going to put this stuff in the show notes. And your website is rebuildlifenow.com.
Okay. Yeah.
.com. Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much for being on today, Harriet. I love this conversation. And, dealing with grief is so powerful, and it can be a true life changer.
Yeah. And thank you for the opportunity and for the great discussion and conversation.
Absolutely. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.